fictional.
Hello everyone. Tonight, we're stepping into 7 missing minutes, a wormhole jump that should have changed nothing, and may have changed everything. A mission that came back successful on paper, but wrong in ways no instrument could measure. All right, let's get into it. The first thing I remember about the wormhole jump was the silence. Not the absence of sound. The parallax was never silent, but the kind of silence that feels like the universe holding its breath. My name is Dr. Caleb Ward, exophysicist, mission specialist aboard the ISS Parallax. The official record will tell you we crossed the Alcubierre gate at 3:17 ship time. The transit window lasted 7 minutes and 4 seconds. Every instrument on board functioned within expected parameters. That's what the record says. I remember something else. Field stability at 99.7, Commander Ishida reported from the forward station. Her voice was steady, the way it always was when we were balanced on the edge of physics. Ward, confirm harmonic alignment. I leaned over my console, watching space-time distortions ripple across the display. The wormhole mouth shimmered like liquid glass suspended in vacuum. It wasn't swirling, it wasn't glowing, it simply folded light inward as if depth itself had been peeled back. Alignment confirmed, I said. Delta gradient is smooth, no shear stress. Behind me, Patel let out a nervous laugh. 7 minutes to the other side, he said. Shortest commute in human history. I remember smiling at that. Then we crossed. There's no sensation for it. No jolt, no cinematic lurch. 1 second, the starfield stretched normally across the forward observation dome. The next, the stars elongated into pale threads, bending toward a vanishing point that did not exist. And then the silence. Every background hum on the ship seemed to thin out. The reactor's vibration faded to a distant tremor. Even my own breathing sounded far away, as if filtered through water. Telemetry's strange, Patel muttered. Define strange, Ishida said. Lag, he replied. It's like the data's arriving before it's recorded. I checked my own feed. He was right. Numbers flickered, half a beat ahead of their timestamps. Radiation readings displayed microseconds before the sensors registered activation. Temporal desync, I said quietly, within tolerances. I told myself that last part mattered. The wormhole interior wasn't darkness. It was layered, translucent membranes of faint blue geometry sliding past one another. They didn't look solid. They looked theoretical, like equations given fragile skin. At 2 minutes in, I heard it. A low resonance, rhythmic, almost mechanical. Thump, thump, thump. It vibrated somewhere behind my ears. Do you hear that? I asked. Hear what? Ishida replied. I hesitated. The sound continued, steady as a heartbeat. Nothing, I said. Probably structural feedback. But the parallax had no such frequency in its architecture. I knew the ship's acoustic profile the way some people know a lover's voice. This was different, too regular, too deliberate. By minute 4, the geometry outside, the hull began to invert. The membranes folded inward, then outward, as if the wormhole couldn't decide which direction was forward. My console glitched. For less than a second, the crew manifest changed. I blinked, leaned closer. Where it should have read, Ward, Caleb, Exophysics. It displayed, Ward, Caleb, Temporal Navigation. I don't have training in temporal navigation. The text snapped back. Ward, Ishida asked. You're pale. Just flux glare, I said. The resonance grew louder. Thump, thump, thump. 7 minutes lasted forever and no time at all. When the exit aperture bloomed ahead of us, it didn't appear like an opening. It appeared like a correction, as though reality had decided to resume its proper shape. Approaching egress, Patel said. All systems green. I braced for turbulence that never came. The parallax slid through the far mouth of the wormhole as smoothly as passing through mist. Stars returned. Normal. Distant. Familiar. The silence broke. Reactor hum restored. Air circulation whispered through vents. My breathing sounded close again. "Transit complete," Ishida announced. 7 minutes, 4 seconds. Applause broke out across the bridge. Patel whooped. Someone in engineering cheered over comms. I should have felt triumph. Instead, I felt misaligned. The star ahead of us, our predetermined exit marker, burned amber against the void. According to the mission plan, it was catalogued as HD 4419, an unremarkable K-type star with 2 gas giants and a barren inner system. I'd memorized its spectral signature. This star was too bright. "Running stellar comparison," I said automatically. The database confirmed HD 4419, spectral class K3V, luminosity within expected range, but through the observation dome, it shimmered faintly green at the edges. "That's not right," I whispered. "Problem?" Ishida asked. "Just recalibrating," I replied. Thumb. The sound hadn't stopped. If anything, it had settled deeper into my skull, syncing with my pulse. Patel turned in his chair. "Hey Caleb," he said casually. "You still owe me dinner when we get back to Luna." I frowned. "I don't gamble." He laughed. "You did. Before launch. You said if the transit worked first try, you'd cover drinks." "I never said that." His smile faltered. "Sure you did. Mess hall. 2 nights before departure." I searched my memory. Nothing. No bet. No conversation. Ishida glanced between us. "Focus, gentlemen." The mission clock ticked onward. 7 minutes behind us. Outside, the universe looked correct. Inside my head, something had shifted 1 degree off-center. I opened my personal log interface, fingers hovering over the keys. For documentation purposes, I began recording. "This is Dr. Caleb Ward," I said softly. "Transit successful. Minor perceptual anomalies noted during wormhole passage. Likely neurochemical response to gravitational lensing." Thumb. I hesitated. "For the record," I added, "I am experiencing an auditory phenomenon not detected by ship systems." I ran a diagnostic on my implant. No irregularities. The star ahead pulsed faintly green again. No one else reacted. I zoomed in on the stellar data. The coordinates were correct. The radiation levels were correct. The system map populated on screen. 2 gas giants. 1 inner rocky planet. Except there should have been an asteroid belt between the 2nd and 3rd orbital tracks. There wasn't. I stared at the empty space where fragmented rock should have glittered. "Commander," I said carefully, "when was the last time Mission Control updated the HD 4419 system profile?" Ishida didn't look concerned. 6 months ago. Why? No reason. Because according to every pre-launch briefing, that asteroid belt had been the reason we chose this exit vector. And now it was gone. Thumb. The sound aligned perfectly with the blinking cursor of my log. For 7 minutes, we had left our universe. We had come back. Everything was almost the same. Almost. The first thing I did was try to prove myself wrong. On paper, that asteroid belt was trivial. A smear of rock and ice, a convenient landmark, nothing more. But the human brain loves anchors. When an anchor is missing, you notice the drift. I pulled the archived mission brief and overlaid it against our live scan. The system map looked like someone had copied the original and erased a line with a careful hand. "Ward," Ishida said, not looking up from her station. "If you're seeing ghosts in the data, keep it to yourself until we've completed insertion." "Understood," I said. Thumb. The delta pulse. I'd started calling it that in my head, because giving something a name makes it feel less like a curse. I forced my attention to the numbers. Parallax was drifting toward our planned approach vector. The wormhole mouth behind us had already collapsed, leaving only ordinary starfield in its place. No return path, no second attempt. The entire point of this mission was that the transit was one way, not physically, just practically. "Engineering," Ishida said over comms. Report core status. A crackle, then Harrow's voice. Core stable, minor feedback on the coil arrays, but nothing outside tolerances. Harrow, chief engineer. Big laugh, liked terrible music. I felt a moment of relief, absurdly, just hearing him. Then my console chirped with a system notification. Crew channel, Harrow requests connection. I accepted, expecting his gruff face in the comm window. A woman appeared instead. Short hair, shaved on one side, skin the color of coffee, with a pale scar running down her cheek. Her eyes were familiar in the way a stranger's eyes aren't, like a face I'd seen in dreams. Ward, she said. Her tone was impatient, intimate. Tell Ishida to stop riding my coils. They're fine. My mouth went dry. Who are you? Her brow furrowed. Cute. She glanced aside as if someone else was in the room with her. He's doing it again. My fingers hovered above the disconnect command. Engineering, I said slowly. Identify yourself. She stared at me like I'd asked her to identify gravity. Harrow, she said. Chief engineer. You okay up there, Caleb? A cold current slid down my spine. The name matched, the role matched. The person did not. I ended the call without replying. For a second, the bridge felt smaller, the air thinner. Patel was busy with navigation updates. Ishida tracked insertion burn parameters. No one had noticed my comm window. I opened the crew manifest again. Ward, Caleb, Exophysics, Ishida, Mako, Command Patel, Ravi, Navigation Harrow, Lenora, Engineering Lenora, not Harlan. I scrolled, my pulse climbing. The manifest listed 31 crew members. The faces attached to the names in the system database were crisp, official, and wrong in subtle ways. Some were entirely unfamiliar. It wasn't just engineering. Half the crew roster looked like it had been rewritten by someone who knew the general outline of our lives, but not the details. I dragged up pre-launch records stored in my private partition. Those should have been immutable. Files I'd personally uploaded from my own terminal months ago. The pre-launch roster in my private archive matched the live manifest, as if it had always been this way. I stared until my eyes watered. Thumb. The pulse had a shape now, an impression behind my forehead. A steady push, like a finger tapping the inside of my skull in time with something vast and patient. I leaned back, forcing myself to breathe. There were only a few possibilities. 1. I was suffering acute stress-induced dissociation, hallucinations, memory errors. 2. The wormhole transit had caused subtle neurological changes, altering my recall. 3. Something external had tampered with ship records. 4. The universe itself. I cut that thought off. I didn't have language for it. That didn't sound like madness. Ward. Ishida's voice snapped me back. Insertion burn in 90 seconds. I need your confirmation on the field decay rate. I swallowed. Decay rate is stable. You're clear. She studied me for a moment. On her screen, my face must have looked fine. On the inside, I felt like my bones were slightly out of alignment. We executed the insertion burn. The parallax's engines lit, a muted vibration running through the deck plating. The star grew brighter in the dome, its light spilling into the bridge with that faint green fringe I couldn't stop seeing. System scan complete, Patel announced, confirming gas giants, one inner terrestrial, no asteroid belt. Ishida nodded. Then we adapt. We're here for the planet anyway. She said it like the belt had never mattered. I tried to speak, tried to tell her that the belt had been one of the mission's key reference points, that our training simulations were based around it. But as I searched my memory for those briefings, they shifted under my grasp, like trying to pick up smoke. Had we trained for a belt? Or had I simply assumed we did because it made sense? I opened a briefing file. Mission overview, final. The text on screen was clear. Exit at HD 4419. No mention of an asteroid belt. None. I rubbed my eyes hard enough to see sparks. The file was the same one I remembered, but the parts I remembered weren't there. A sick thought rose. Maybe my memory was wrong. Maybe the belt never existed. Maybe I'd built an anchor out of nothing because my mind needed a landmark. Thump. The pulse disagreed. It beat steadily, like a metronome marking the wrong tempo. We settled into orbit around the inner planet 3 hours later. It was a dull, rocky world, thick with cloud cover and storm bands. The surface reflected little light. No oceans visible from this distance. No obvious signs of life. Atmospheric composition? Ishida asked. Patel checked his feed. Nitrogen heavy, trace oxygen, chlorine compounds. Pressure is higher than expected. I pulled up my own sensor array. The numbers looked normal until I read them twice. Then they looked like numbers I'd seen before, long ago, in a context that made no sense here. Something about the ratios felt familiar in a way that made my stomach twist. Can we land? Patel asked. Ishida shook her head. Not yet. We follow protocol. We send drones. We map. We don't rush. Her voice was the same as always. That steadiness should have calmed me. Instead, I caught myself watching her profile, trying to confirm she was Ishida, my Ishida. Her hair was pulled into the same tight knot. Her jawline was sharp. Her posture was controlled. She wore the same mission patch on her sleeve. And yet, when she reached for her coffee pouch, she used her left hand. I was almost certain she was right-handed. Almost. The bridge lighting dimmed for orbital night. The planet below us became a darker smear. Storms faintly luminous where lightning flashed under cloud layers. The delta pulse grew louder in the dark. Thump, thump, thump. I retreated to my quarters after shift rotation, needing space to think without eyes on me. The corridor outside my cabin smelled faintly of disinfectant and warm electronics. Inside, it smelled wrong. Not rotten, not chemical. Sweet, like damp soil. I froze in the doorway. My quarters were neat. Too neat. The few personal items I'd brought, photos, notes, a battered paperback, were arranged as if by someone trying to mimic the idea of my life. On my desk sat a framed photo I didn't recognize. It showed me, smiling, arm around a woman with Harrow's eyes. Behind us, a beach under a pale sun. The caption burned at the bottom in printed text. Cal and Len, Lunar Harbor, 2089. My fingers trembled as I lifted the frame. The paper was real. The image was real. The smile on my face was real. But the memory attached to it was a blank wall. I put the photo down slowly. On my bunk lay my flight jacket. Except the name patch didn't read Ward. It read Ward 2. A thin, neat line of stitching. As if there had once been another version of me, and this one needed a number to distinguish him. My throat tightened. The delta pulse became almost deafening. Thump. And for the first time, I realized something that made the room tilt. The sound wasn't inside my head. It was coming from the walls, from the ship, from the parallax itself, resonating through metal and air like a buried heart. I pressed my ear to the bulkhead. The pulse was perfectly steady, traveling through the structure, as if the ship had brought something back with it, or as if the ship had come back changed. I backed away, palms slick. My intercom chimed. "Dr. Ward," a voice said, calm and synthetic. "Please report to medical for post-transit evaluation." It wasn't the ship's usual tone. It sounded like someone had trained an AI to imitate concern. I stared at the intercom panel until the light blinked out. Then, softly, from somewhere deep in the corridor, I heard a second sound layered beneath the pulse. A whisper, too faint to be words. But it had the cadence of my own voice. Medical was 3 decks down. I don't remember deciding to go. I just remember walking. The corridor lighting had shifted into sleep cycle mode, a muted blue that flattened shadows and made every surface look colder than it was. My boots echoed too loudly against the deck. Each step seemed slightly out of sync with the delta pulse. Thump, thump, thump. As I descended the ladder well, I tried to align the rhythm of my breathing with it. If I could match it, maybe it would fade into background noise. It didn't. Halfway down, I passed a reflective panel inset into the wall. I caught my reflection without meaning to. For a fraction of a second, it lagged. Not much. A blink behind me. I stopped. So did it. I raised my hand slowly. The reflection followed. Stress response, I muttered. But my voice sounded wrong in the shaft, slightly doubled, as if someone had whispered the same words half a beat later. I resumed walking. Medical bay doors slid open with a pneumatic sigh. The room beyond was sterile, bright, white panels and diagnostic equipment arranged in clean symmetry. The air smelled sharply of antiseptic. Dr. Cater stood by the central exam table, except her hair was longer. In my memory, Cater kept it cropped close to her scalp. Practical, efficient. Now it fell past her shoulders, braided loosely down her back. "Caleb," she said gently, "have a seat." Her voice was identical. I remained standing. Post-transit evaluation wasn't scheduled until tomorrow. She tilted her head. It's standard protocol to run immediate scans after first-time wormhole exposure. It wasn't in the briefing. It was, she replied, not unkindly. Thump. The pulse vibrated through the floor. "Do you hear that?" I asked. "Hear what?" she said. I almost laughed at the symmetry of it. I sat on the exam table. Cold metal pressed through my uniform. She moved with calm efficiency, attaching neural leads to my temples, wrists, the base of my skull. Her fingers were steady, familiar. The scanner hummed to life, projecting a faint lattice of light around my head. "Any nausea?" she asked. "No." "Visual disturbances?" "Yes." She paused. "Describe them." I hesitated. If I told her about the manifest, about Harrow becoming Lenora, about the missing asteroid belt, it would sound like delusion. "My memory feels misaligned," I said carefully. "Details aren't matching expectations." "That's common," she said. "Cognitive drift after high curvature transit." I frowned. "High curvature?" She tapped a screen. "The Alcubierre gate generates extreme space-time gradients. We anticipated minor neurological side effects." Anticipated. I scanned her terminal. Projected on the screen was a research paper titled Post-Transit Identity Dissonance, Preliminary Findings, authored by Ward Caleb. My stomach dropped. "That's my name," I said. "Yes," she replied. "The publication date was 2 years ago." I leaned forward despite the neural leads pulling at my skin. "I've never written that." She studied me with something that looked like concern layered over calculation. "Caleb, you spearheaded the cognitive risk assessment for this mission." "No," I said. The word came out too fast. "Thumb." The pulse stuttered, then resumed. She turned the screen toward me fully. There it was, my face in a conference photo, standing beside Ishida, beside Patel, beside Lenora Harrow. Behind us, a banner read, "Parallax Initiative, Secondary Trial Phase, Secondary." "How many times have we done this?" I asked. Her silence was heavier than any answer. My heart pounded in my throat. "Cater," I said quietly. "How many wormhole transits has Parallax completed?" Her eyes flicked toward the bay doors, then back to me. "This is your first," she said. It was the way she said it. Not a lie. Not entirely, but incomplete. The scanner emitted a sharp tone. Lines of neural activity cascaded across her display. "Your hippocampal patterns are unstable," she murmured. "What does that mean?" "It means your memory centers are attempting to reconcile contradictory datasets." I laughed softly. "Contradictory datasets?" "Yes." "As in two versions of reality?" She didn't answer. Instead, she injected something into the IV port at my wrist. "What is that?" "Stabilizer," she said. My vision blurred slightly at the edges. The delta pulse dulled for a moment, then it came back stronger. Thumb. The medical lights flickered. Keita looked up sharply. "That's not..." The room shuddered, not violently, just enough to make the equipment hum at a different pitch. On her screen, my neural activity spiked wildly. 2 patterns overlaid, slightly offset, like double exposure film. "That's impossible," she whispered. "What is?" She turned the display so I could see. There were 2 distinct brainwave signatures, both labeled Ward, Caleb. "They're overlapping," she said. Like what?" "Like you're occupying the same cognitive space as another version of yourself." My mouth went dry. The lights flickered again. For an instant, the room shifted. The walls seemed narrower. The equipment arranged differently. Keita's braids shorter. Then everything snapped back. I gripped the edge of the exam table. "Did you see that?" I asked. She stared at me. "No." The delta pulse accelerated. Thumb, 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 thumb. Not steady anymore. Panicked. An alarm began to sound faintly in the distance. Not medical. Structural. Keita's console filled with warnings. Spatial coherence. Variance. Deck 3. "That's the bridge," I said. She ripped the neural leads from my head. "You need to rest. I need to see what's happening." "Caleb." The lights went out completely. Darkness swallowed the bay. In the pitch black, the delta pulse was thunderous. Thumb. And beneath it, a second pulse, out of phase. Thumb. Thumb. Like 2 hearts beating in the same chest, slightly misaligned. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting everything in red. Keita stood frozen, eyes wide. From the corridor outside medical, voices rose, not shouting, conversing. Dozens of them, all calm, all overlapping. And one of them was mine. I stepped toward the door before she could stop me. As it slid open, I saw the corridor beyond filled with crew members. Except there were too many. Ishida stood near the ladder well. 3 Ishidas, 1 left-handed, 1 right-handed. One with a scar across her chin that I didn't recognize. They were all speaking at once, not to each other, but in slightly different directions, as if each was addressing a different reality. Patel stood nearby, 2 Patels, 1 older, 1 younger. Lenora. Harrow leaned against the bulkhead, watching me. Behind her stood Harlan Harrow. They locked eyes with each other, then with me. The delta pulse synchronized with the second beat. Thumb, thumb. The air felt thick, resistant. "Caleb," one of the Ishidas said. "Caleb," echoed another. "Caleb," came a third. Their voices overlapped perfectly. I took a step back into medical. The corridor stretched longer than it should have. The figures shimmered slightly, edges blurring as if 2 images were trying to occupy the same frame. "We shouldn't have come back," one Patel whispered. "We didn't," another corrected. The words hit me like a physical blow. I turned slowly. Behind me, in the reflection of a darkened monitor, stood a 4th figure. Me. But not exactly. His uniform patch read, Ward 1. Mine read, Ward 2. He smiled faintly, and I felt, with horrifying clarity, that he remembered everything. The reflection didn't move when I did. That was the first detail my mind latched onto. The 4th version of me stood in the dark monitor glass, posture relaxed, head slightly tilted. His expression wasn't hostile. It was patient, like he'd been waiting for me to notice him. "Caleb," Keita said behind me, her voice tight. "You need to step away from the corridor." But the corridor wasn't stable anymore. The multiple crew members wavered as if submerged in heat distortion. Their outlines overlapped, separated, then merged again. The red emergency lighting strobed across faces that were almost identical, yet not. The delta pulse was no longer just a sound. It was pressure, a rhythmic compression inside the air itself. Thumb, 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 thumb. 2 beats, slightly misaligned. I looked down at my sleeve. Ward 2. I hadn't noticed when it changed, or maybe it had always been that way. The reflection of Ward 1 stepped forward inside the glass. The real corridor behind me fell silent all at once. The overlapping voices cut off mid-syllable. "Caleb," the reflection said. His lips moved in perfect sync with the sound. I didn't speak. I couldn't. "You're destabilizing," he continued calmly. "You always do at this stage." "At this stage." "What stage?" I managed. "The reconciliation phase." Behind me, the corridor flickered. For an instant, only one Ishida stood there. One Patel. One Harrow. Then the duplicates bled back in. Keita grabbed my arm. Her hand felt real. Solid. "There's no one there," she whispered urgently. "You're staring at your own reflection." I didn't look away from the glass. "He remembers," I said. "Caleb." Ward 1 smiled slightly wider. "You think you're the original," he said. "You always do." The delta pulse accelerated. Thump, thump, thump. The monitor glass fractured, not physically, but visually, like overlapping frames of video misaligned by milliseconds. "I'm not hallucinating," I said, more to myself than anyone. "No," Ward 1 agreed. "You're integrating." The words scraped against my nerves. Integrating what? 7 minutes. The lights flickered again. The medical bay around me shifted subtly. Equipment rearranged by inches. Keita's braid shortened, lengthened, shortened again. "You weren't supposed to remember this much," Ward 1 continued. "That's the problem." Memory surged inside my head like a door cracking open. A conference room, the parallax under construction, a debate about cognitive bleed-through, my voice arguing that identity might not remain singular across high-curvature transit. I staggered. Keita's grip tightened. "Your neural activity is spiking again." "Ask him," I whispered. "There's no him." Ward 1 stepped closer to the inside of the glass until his face filled it. "There's only so much continuity a mind can sustain," he said. "The wormhole doesn't just connect 2 points in space. It intersects probability layers. Every viable version of the mission overlaps during transit." The second pulse synced briefly with the first. Thump, thump, then fell out of phase again. "You're saying there are multiple parallaxes," I said. "There were," he corrected gently. The corridor outside medical began to compress visually, like depth was being flattened. The duplicate crew members started to blur into one another. "Most versions collapse back into coherence," he said. "One dominant branch stabilizes, the others dissipate. And us. You're not the dominant branch." The words landed with terrifying simplicity. A sharp tone erupted from Keita's console. She gasped. "The ship's spatial metrics are fluctuating across all decks." "Because you're resisting," Ward 1 said. "You're holding on to incompatible memory threads." The beach photo flashed into my mind. Cal and Len, Lunar Harbor, 2089. "I don't remember that life," I said. "You don't have to," he replied. "But it happened, in another alignment." The corridor outside medical suddenly emptied. No duplicates, no crew, just a long red-lit passage stretching too far into the distance. The silence was total. Thump. Only one pulse now. Slow. Heavy. "Where did they go?" I whispered. "They're resolving," Ward 1 said. "Into what?" He didn't answer. Instead, the glass surface rippled, and I saw something that made my breath stop. Behind his shoulder, through the reflection, I could see space. Not the bridge, not the planet. Open vacuum. Stars arranged in patterns I didn't recognize. The parallax wasn't orbiting HD 4419 in that reflection. It was drifting in deep interstellar dark. "No," I said. "You remember the second trial?" he said softly. The memory slammed into me fully this time. A test transit. Unmanned. Officially. Except it hadn't been unmanned. I had insisted on riding along, The wormhole had destabilized. The ship had come back. Empty. That had been the official report. But the truth was that something had come back, just not in the configuration we expected. "I died," I whispered. Ward 1's eyes softened. "Yes." The word echoed inside my skull. "But so did I," he added. The medical bay flickered violently. For a split second, I saw multiple versions of myself standing around the room, some in different uniforms, some older, some with scars I didn't recognize, all of them watching. "You're the residual," Ward 1 said, a cognitive echo that didn't fully collapse. "I'm real," I snapped. "Yes," he said, "but not stable." The floor lurched, gravity fluctuated. Keita cried out as equipment toppled. On the far wall, a crack spidered through the paneling, not physical damage, but a seam of blackness where the red light failed to penetrate. Through that crack, I heard a deeper resonance. Not the delta pulse. Something vaster. "You have two options," Ward 1 said calmly. "Release incompatible memories and allow this branch to stabilize without you. Meaning, you fade." The word hung in the air like frost. "Or," I demanded, "continue resisting." The crack widened. The red emergency lights flickered between medical bay and empty vacuum. And this version of the parallax collapses entirely. Keita was shouting something at me, but her voice sounded distant, distorted. The crack spread across the ceiling like ink in water. I felt the weight of every contradictory memory pressing inward. The asteroid belt that existed and didn't. Lenora and Harlan. Left-handed Ishida. Right-handed Ishida. The beach under a pale sun. "You're not the first to hesitate," Ward 1 said gently. "How many times?" I asked. He hesitated for the first time. "Enough!" The delta pulse returned, louder than ever. Thumb, and beneath it, faint but rising, another beat. Thumb, out of phase. The ship groaned. The crack in the wall widened into a vertical slit of absolute darkness. Stars flickered inside it. Not ours. Ward. 1 extended his hand through the glass. It didn't break. It didn't shatter. His hand simply passed through the reflective surface like it was liquid. "Choose," he said. Behind him, the reflection of the parallax drifted alone in empty space. Behind me, the medical bay trembled on the edge of tearing itself apart. For the first time since the wormhole, I understood something clearly. The 7 minutes hadn't ended. We were still inside them. I didn't take his hand. Not at first. The slit in the wall widened another inch, and the blackness inside it felt less like absence and more like depth. Not empty space, not vacuum. Something layered, as if reality had thickness and we were seeing between its sheets. Keita's voice snapped back into clarity. "Caleb, look at me!" I turned. She was standing exactly where she should be. One version, one body. The braid long again, resting over her shoulder. The medical bay solid around her, though the red lighting pulsed irregularly. "There's no fracture," she insisted. "No one else here. You're dissociating." The crack behind her vanished. The room was intact. The delta pulse softened, settling into a slow, steady rhythm. Thumb. I blinked hard. The reflection in the monitor showed only me. No Ward 1, no drifting parallax, just my own pale face under emergency lighting. I stepped back from the wall. "Run the scan again," I said. Keita hesitated, then complied. The neural lattice flickered to life around my head once more. "Your readings are chaotic," she murmured, "but within survivable thresholds." "2 signatures?" I asked. She glanced at the display. "1," she said. The word hit harder than if she'd confirmed 2. I forced a slow breath. Maybe this was the collapse Ward 1 had meant. The reconciliation, the fading of incompatible strands. Maybe the duplicates were already gone. The intercom crackled overhead. "Bridge to medical," Ishida's voice said. Singular, steady. Report. Cater tapped the panel. Dr. Ward is experiencing acute perceptual distortion. I recommend temporary sedation. I'm not being sedated, I said sharply. A pause on the line. Ward, Ishida replied. We need you functional. I am functional. Silence. Return to the bridge, she said finally. Now. The channel closed. Cater searched my face. If you're seeing things... I'm not sure what I'm seeing, I admitted. That felt closer to truth. The delta pulse shifted again, not louder, closer, as if it were traveling through bone instead of steel. I stood from the exam table. The room held steady, no fractures, no alternate stars bleeding through. But something had changed. The air felt heavier, denser, as though gravity had increased by a fraction too small for instruments to detect. I left medical without waiting for clearance. The corridor outside was empty. No duplicates, no overlapping voices, just the hum of life support and the faint vibration of engines maintaining orbit. My boots struck the deck in even rhythm. Thump, thump. The pulse matched them exactly now, not out of phase. Aligned. That should have comforted me. Instead, it terrified me. When I reached the ladder well, I caught my reflection again in the wall panel. It moved in perfect sync, but the name patch on my chest, it didn't read Ward 2 anymore. It read simply, Ward, no number. I touched it. The stitching was smooth, no sign of alteration. On the bridge, everything appeared normal. Ishida stood at command. Patel monitored orbital telemetry. The forward dome displayed the storm-wrapped planet below, lightning flickering beneath cloud layers. One Ishida, one Patel. Report, she said as I entered. Perceptual distortion episode, I replied evenly. Resolved. She studied me carefully. Define resolved. I'm no longer seeing multiple instances of crew. Patel glanced over his shoulder. That's reassuring. There was no hint of irony in his voice. I moved to my station and brought up planetary scans. The data streamed in smoothly. Nitrogen-heavy atmosphere, chlorine traces, high pressure, familiar, too familiar. I've seen this before, I murmured. Simulation, Patel suggested. No, not simulation. Memory. The second trial, the one we'd never publicly acknowledged. The one where the parallax had returned. Altered. Ishida, I said quietly. How many times have we orbited this planet? She didn't look at me. Once. That's not what I mean. Her jaw tightened. The delta pulse deepened, vibrating through the bridge floor. Thump. A faint tremor ran through the ship. Orbital drift, Patel said. Gravity well is fluctuating. That's impossible, I said automatically. Mass readings were stable. They're not now. On the main display, the planet's cloud bands shifted unnaturally fast. Storm systems rotating in reverse. Run comparative scans, I said. Patel's fingers flew across his console, his expression drained of color. The atmospheric composition just changed. How? He swallowed. It's matching pre-transit Earth. Silence fell across the bridge. I pulled up the raw data. Nitrogen 78%, oxygen 21%. Trace gases aligning within human habitable range. That's wrong, I whispered. The planet below us shimmered, cloud cover thinning, blue emerging beneath, oceanic blue. No, I said again. The delta pulse surged, thump, thump. For a heartbeat, the forward dome didn't show a planet. It showed Earth, but not quite. The continents were wrong, coastlines unfamiliar, yet close enough to trigger recognition. The image flickered back to the storm world. Patel's breathing grew ragged. Tell me you saw that. Ishida's voice remained steady, but her knuckles were white on the command rail. I saw atmospheric fluctuation only. I looked at Patel. He stared at me. You saw it, I said. He nodded once. Relief and dread collided inside me. 2 observers, I murmured. What? Ishida demanded. Nothing. The planet flickered again. Ocean. Storm. Ocean. Storm. Like 2 versions competing for dominance. The delta pulse split. Thumb. Thumb. Out of phase once more. A realization formed slowly, horribly. It's not the ship, I said. It's not just us. Explain, Ishida snapped. The wormhole didn't bring us to the wrong universe. The planet below stabilized briefly as the storm whirled, then shimmered into blue oceans again. We're in both, I finished. The words hung heavy. Patel whispered, That's not possible. Neither was crossing a wormhole, I replied. The ship shuddered violently this time. Warning lights flared across the bridge. Spatial coherence variance, orbital frame. The planet below began to split visually, a faint seam running across its equator. On one side, storm-wrapped rock. On the other, blue oceans and green land masses, 2 worlds occupying the same coordinates. Caleb, Ishida said quietly, tell me how to fix this. I didn't answer immediately, because deep down, I already knew. The reconciliation hadn't finished, and it wasn't just happening inside my head, it was happening to everything. The delta pulse thundered through the hull. Thumb, 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 thumb. 2 universes, 1 orbit, and only one of them would remain. The ship's alarms didn't scream. They chattered, short bursts of tone that sounded almost conversational, as if the parallax itself couldn't decide which emergency protocol to commit to. Panels flashed warnings in red, then dimmed, then flashed again with different wording. Spatial coherence variance, gravitational gradient anomaly, sensor fusion error, no error detected. I watched the planet seam widen across the forward dome, like reality was splitting at its stitching. The storm world and the ocean world pressed against each other without blending, each refusing to concede. Patel's hands shook over his controls. Orbit is destabilizing, he said. We're being tugged in 2 directions. Thrusters aren't responding, Ishida said. Her voice stayed steady, but her eyes flicked between displays too quickly. Engineering, report. Static. Then Lenora Harrow's voice came through, clear, annoyed. I'm seeing conflicting drive commands. It's like 2 command queues are running at once. My stomach tightened. Do you hear the delta pulse? I asked before I could stop myself. A pause. No, Lenora said. What are you talking about? I clenched my jaw. Of course she didn't. If the pulse was a marker for overlap, maybe only certain minds caught it. Maybe only those misaligned. Ishida's gaze cut toward me. Ward, focus. I forced myself to breathe. We need to stop the divergence, I said. Something is causing the branch overlap to persist. Patel let out a small, strangled laugh. Branch overlap. He looked at me like he wanted to accuse me of insanity, but didn't have time. The seam on the planet snapped wider, and the forward dome briefly showed both worlds at once, superimposed instead of side by side. Storm clouds became ghosted over blue oceans. Lightning crawled across green continents. My vision doubled. My stomach lurched. Thumb. The delta pulse hammered in my chest. Now, no longer just sound. Caleb, Patel whispered. I'm seeing another nav solution. What do you mean? He tilted his screen toward me. 2 orbital projections were displayed in different colors. One held stable around the storm world. The other showed a decaying spiral toward the ocean world. Both were labeled valid. 2 universes, I murmured. 2 gravity wells, Patel corrected, voice thin. Ishida keyed the intercom. All hands, emergency protocol, strap in, prepare for spatial shear. She didn't sound like she believed her own words. I dragged up our wormhole transit data, the Alcubierre gate logs. The field harmonics, the curvature gradients, everything still read normal, except for one line buried in the time-stamped telemetry. Delta pulse detected. Source, internal structure. I stared at it. The ship had detected it, just once, during transit. Then the line disappeared as if overwritten. No, not disappeared. It was listed as file corrupted. Commander, I said, during transit the ship logged a delta pulse. Ishida frowned. That term isn't in our lexicon. It's in the log, I insisted. An internal resonance. It might be the anchor keeping both branches active. Patel's eyes widened slightly. An anchor, like a reference point. A constant. Yes, I said, feeling the idea click into place with nauseating clarity. If the overlap needs something to sync to, something that exists in both versions, then the pulse could be the synchronization signal. Ishida's gaze sharpened. And you think we can disrupt it? I think we have to. The ship shuddered again. Gravity tilted. My stomach rose into my throat. Patel grabbed the edge of his console, knuckles white. For a moment, the dome showed the ocean world fully. Blue, bright, almost beautiful. The sunlight on it looked warm. Then a fraction of a second later, the storm world snapped back. The transition wasn't smooth. It was a hard cut, like a channel switching. And each cut brought with it a faint whisper, layered under the delta pulse. A phrase that I couldn't quite hear, but could almost understand. I clenched my teeth and leaned close to my console speaker, trying to isolate the audio. The whisper resolved into syllables that made my blood run cold. Let go. Ward, Ishida said sharply. If you have a plan, say it. I swallowed. We locate the source of the pulse inside the ship. Engineering reported feedback in the coils. If the resonance is tied to the wormhole field arrays, we might be able to dampen it. Lenora's voice cut in, irritation replaced by something uneasy. Dampening the coils mid-orbit is risky. Everything is risky, Ishida said. I rose from my station. I'll go to engineering. Ishida's eyes narrowed. No, you stay on the bridge. Commander, she stepped closer. You're the only one reporting auditory phenomena. That makes you unstable in my chain of command. The word struck a nerve. Unstable, not real, residual. My throat tightened. Patel looked between us, then spoke quietly. He's right about one thing. We need to pick a reality before it picks for us. Ishida's jaw flexed. The ship lurched hard, throwing us all sideways. Patel slammed into his chair. Ishida caught herself against the command rail. On the dome, the planet split again. The seam opened like a wound. A third image flickered for an instant. Stars, deep interstellar dark, the parallax drifting alone. Ward 1's reflection, implied rather than seen. My skin prickled. Ishida saw it too. I knew she did by the way her breath hitched. She recovered instantly. All right, she said. Ward, Patel, you go to engineering. I'll hold the bridge. Patel stared. Me? Your navigation. If the coils affect orbital frame, I need you there. Patel swallowed hard but nodded. We secured ourselves for the ladder well and pushed off into the corridor. The ship's interior lighting flickered between blue sleep cycle and red emergency. The walls seemed to shift subtly as we moved, like the corridor was sometimes longer, sometimes shorter, never entirely consistent. Thump, thump. The delta pulse grew louder as we descended. With every rung, it felt less like sound and more like proximity, like we were moving toward the source of a heartbeat too large to belong to any living thing. Patel breathed hard beside me. Caleb, he said quietly, if this is a hallucination, it's a damn convincing one. I didn't answer, because I could feel it now, beneath my palms, through the ladder well metal, a rhythmic vibration, not random, a signal. And the closer we got to engineering, the more certain I became that the ship wasn't just sinking realities. It was listening for something on the other side. And something was answering back. Engineering was never quiet, but now it sounded wrong. Not louder, not broken, wrong. The coil arrays that had generated the wormhole field rose in concentric arcs around the central chamber, each ring humming at a frequency just below conscious perception. Except now that hum was layered, two tones occupying the same space, one slightly higher than the other. They drifted in and out of alignment as Patel and I stepped onto the grated floor. Lenora Harrow stood at the main console, sleeves rolled up, grease streaked along her jaw. She looked exactly as she should, solid, singular. "Tell me you've got a clean fix," she said without turning. "No," Patel replied faintly. Lenora exhaled through her nose. "Figures." I moved closer to the coils. The delta pulse was overwhelming here. Thumb. The metal under my boots vibrated in time. I pressed my palm against the nearest ring. It was warm, not from friction, from activity. "These are still partially charged," I said. Lenora shot me a sharp look. "They shouldn't be. The gate collapsed." "They're resonating," I insisted. "Like they're maintaining a connection." "To what?" she snapped. I hesitated. "To the overlap." Patel shifted uneasily. "You're going to have to define that eventually." The coils pulsed visibly now, tiny fluctuations in the air around them, like heat shimmer. Lenora's console emitted a sharp ping. "Drive telemetry is duplicating again," she muttered. "Two feedback loops, same origin point." She tapped the screen and projected the data into the air. Two nearly identical signal streams radiated from the coil array core, one labeled primary, the other labeled mirror. "They're perfectly synchronized," Patel said. "No," I whispered. They weren't. If you watched closely, the mirror signal lagged by a fraction of a second, like a reflection. The realization crawled over my skin. "It's not a second command cue," I said slowly. "It's an echo." Lenora frowned. "Echoes don't have full signal integrity. This one does." The delta pulse surged. Thumb, thumb. For an instant, the engineering bay flickered. The coil rings shifted orientation, angled differently. Lenora's hair was shorter. Patel stood 2 steps closer to the core than he actually was. Then everything snapped back. Patel inhaled sharply. "You saw that?" "Yes," I said. Lenora stared at us. "Saw what?" The mirror signal spiked. The coil at the center of the chamber glowed faintly blue, not bright enough to trigger alarms, bright enough to be wrong. "It's re-establishing curvature," I said. Lenora's irritation drained away. "That's impossible. The power draw alone." The lights dimmed, not just in engineering, throughout the ship. Emergency reserves kicked in automatically. The coil array brightened in response, drawing energy. "Caleb," Patel whispered, "if it opens again..." "It won't," I said. But I wasn't sure, because this didn't feel like a full gate forming. It felt smaller, more precise, like a needle threading a seam between two fabrics. The delta pulse changed tempo, not faster, more deliberate. Thumb, pause, thumb, pause, a call and response. I stepped closer to the core until the heat against my face forced me to squint. Within the blue glow, the air thickened. Space bent inward slightly, distorting the grid lines of the chamber floor. A thin line of darkness appeared at the center. Not a crack, a filament. "Shut it down," Patel said urgently. Lenora's hands flew across her console. "I'm trying. The coils aren't responding." The filament widened by a hair's breadth. Through it, I saw stars. Not HD 4419, not the storm world. Deep space, and drifting there. The parallax, alone, no planet beneath it, no seam in orbit, just emptiness. The mirror signal spiked again. Lenora swore under her breath. "It's pulling synchronization data." "From what?" Patel demanded. From itself, I said. The understanding hit like ice water. The ship was referencing another version of its own state, a stable one, a branch where no planet flickered, where no crew duplicated, where perhaps only one Caleb remained. Caleb, Patel said, voice tight. You're staring like you recognize that place. I did. I remembered the second trial, the return of an empty ship. Except it hadn't been empty. It had been singular, the dominant branch, the one that survived. The delta pulse slowed again. Thumb. Pause. Thumb. The filament widened enough for a hand to pass through. And from the other side, a hand reached back. Mine. Ward 1 stood within the sliver of dark, the drifting parallax behind him. He looked exhausted. Stop resisting, he said calmly. His voice carried clearly across the engineering bay. Lenora and Patel froze. They saw him. Who the hell is that? Lenora whispered. Integration point, Ward 1 replied, answering her without looking away from me. You're going to collapse this branch, I said. He nodded slightly. Yes. And that's better? It's stable. The filament trembled. The coil rings vibrated violently. Warning lights strobed. Patel backed away from the core. Caleb, if he steps through. He won't, I said, because I understood now. He didn't need to. The synchronization only required agreement, a dominant reference. You're the stable branch, I said slowly. Yes. And I'm the divergence. Yes. Lenora's console erupted in error messages. Spatial convergence threshold exceeded. The engineering floor buckled slightly as gravitational vectors twisted. Make a choice, Patel shouted. Ward 1 extended his hand fully through the filament. His sleeve, red. Ward. No number. Neither did mine. The stitching had vanished. You don't fade, he said quietly. You merge. With what? I demanded. With continuity. The delta pulse and the mirror signal synchronized perfectly for the first time. Thumb. No echo, no lag. The filament flared brighter. The image of the drifting parallax sharpened. In that version, the coils were dark, inactive. No seam in orbit, no flickering world. Just deep, empty space. No planet at all. We never reached it, I whispered. No, Ward 1 said. We came back before orbit. The memory slammed into place. The second trial had aborted immediately after transit. The dominant branch never approached the planet. It avoided the overlap entirely. This branch, my branch, had stayed, observed, destabilized. You anchored us, Ward 1 said. Your need to understand. The words cut deeper than accusation. Behind me, Patel yelled, Caleb! The coil array screamed as metal strained. The filament widened to the size of a doorway. Ward 1 stepped halfway through, not fully crossing, just enough. You can let go, he said softly. The delta pulse slowed to a single steady beat. Thumb, waiting. My mouth opened and nothing came out. Not because I had nothing to say, because every answer split into two possibilities the moment I tried to speak. Patel grabbed my shoulder and yanked me back a step. Caleb, look at me. That thing is not you. It is, I whispered. Lenora's face was lit by the blue glow and the flashing alarms. She looked like someone who'd just watched a law of nature snap in half. If that's you, she said hoarsely, then which one of you is on my ship? Ward 1's eyes never left mine. Both, he said. The word should have been nonsense. In the coil's glow, it wasn't. The engineering bay felt stretched, like the air had been pulled taut between two hooks. The filament had become an opening now, a vertical slice of darkness with stars behind it, and a version of the parallax drifting in infinite quiet. No planet, no seam, no orbit, just the ship, alone, stable. The delta pulse beat once, slow and heavy. Thumb. Then, beneath it, I heard something new. A third cadence, faint, like fingertips tapping from the far side of a wall. Not in phase with either pulse, impatient. "Do you hear that?" I asked. Patel's eyes darted. "Hear what?" Ward 1's expression tightened. "No." The answer was too quick. Lenora turned to her console. "The coils are drawing more power. They're going to overload the field emitters." The ship trembled as if agreeing. I looked at Ward 1's hand extended through the opening. It was steady, unshaking, familiar in a way that made my skin crawl. "If I merge," I said, forcing the words out, "what happens to them?" I nodded toward Patel and Lenora. Ward 1's gaze flicked briefly to them, then back. "They remain in the stable branch. And this branch, it collapses." I swallowed. Meaning it ceases to be a distinct alignment. That was a careful way to avoid saying what it would feel like. Dying without the dignity of an ending. Patel's voice cracked. "Caleb, what is he asking you to do?" "Choose," Lenora whispered, as if the word tasted bitter. The third tapping grew louder. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't coming from the coils. It was coming from the doorway behind us. I turned. At the far end of engineering, the corridor light flickered. In the strobing red, a figure stood perfectly still. Not a crew member, not a duplicate. Something else. It was shaped like a man in a uniform, but its edges were indistinct, as though it had been painted on air. The parallax patch on its chest was wrong, too clean, too symmetrical. It lifted its head, and I felt the delta pulse shift in response, like the ship recognizing a command. Ward 1's voice sharpened. "Don't look at it!" Lenora stared, frozen. "What the hell is that?" Patel's grip tightened on my shoulder. "Caleb, you seeing that?" "Yes," I said. Relief and terror collided again. It wasn't, only in my head. The figure took one step forward. No sound of boots, just a subtle change in the corridor's depth, as if the hallway extended longer behind it. Tap, tap, tap. The tapping cadence wasn't from footsteps. It was from the figure's presence pressing on reality like knuckles on glass. Ward 1's hand flexed. "It noticed you." "What is it?" I demanded, his jaw clenched. "The reason the overlap doesn't resolve cleanly." The figure advanced another step. As it moved, the corridor around it briefly showed a different set of walls, different signage, different lighting, then snapped back. It carried multiple ship interiors with it, like a cloak. Lenora whispered, "It's dragging the other versions in." The coils flared brighter. The opening to the stable parallax widened. Ward 1's eyes were fierce now. "Caleb, now!" The figure reached the engineering threshold. The air cooled sharply. My breath fogged. The delta pulse slowed, until it felt like a countdown. Thumb, tap, tap, thumb, tap, tap. Patel shoved me back. "Caleb, do something!" My mind scrambled. If I reached for Ward 1, we'd merge into the stable branch. The opening would close. The overlap would collapse. But that figure, it wasn't just a duplicate. It felt like an adaptation, a function in the universe that existed to enforce coherence by consuming divergence. I realized, with sudden clarity, that it wasn't coming for the ship. It was coming for me. Not Caleb Ward, not Ward 2, the part of me that refused to collapse, the part that anchored. The figure entered the bay. The lights dimmed. Every screen in engineering blinked once. On Lenora's console, all text shifted into a single repeating phrase. "Let go." Lenora backed away, eyes wide. "My console is..." Patel screamed as the gravity shifted violently. He slammed to his knees. The figure didn't react. It didn't hurry. It simply moved toward me with the calm inevitability of a correction. Ward 1 leaned farther through the opening. "It can't enter the stable branch," he said, "but it can follow you if you hesitate too long." "What happens if it reaches me?" I asked, already knowing I didn't want the answer. "Ward." One's voice dropped to something almost tender. Then there's nothing left to merge. The figure raised its hand. Its fingers were too long, jointed wrong, bending as if they were made of soft metal. Tap. The air itself made the sound as it touched an invisible boundary around me. I staggered backward, hitting the console edge. The opening to the stable parallax pulsed, inviting. Ward 1's hand was right there. Patel clawed forward on the floor, gasping, face twisted in panic. "Caleb, please!" Lenora's eyes flicked between the opening and the figure, and I saw the raw truth in her expression. She didn't understand, but she understood enough. "This ship is tearing," she said. "Whatever you are, whatever that is, end it!" The figure advanced one more step. The cold sharpened. My skin prickled. The delta pulse and the tapping synced for an instant. Thumb. Tap. The opening flared bright blue. Ward 1's hand, steady, waiting. I made my choice. I reached out and grabbed it. His skin was warm, solid, real. The moment our hands touched, the world snapped. Not dissolved, not faded, snapped, like a magnetic alignment locking into place. I felt a violent surge of memory rush through me, not as images but as entire lived seconds. Conversations I'd never had, decisions I'd never made, the beach, the conference, the second trial, the abort order, the empty return, and beneath it all, the 7 minutes. They weren't behind us. They were layered through us. Ward 1 pulled. I stumbled forward into the opening. The figure behind me stretched, as if the corridor itself was trying to follow. A sound like tearing cloth filled the engineering bay. Lenora screamed. Patel's voice vanished mid-word. The cold became absolute. And then, as I crossed the threshold, I heard the figure make a sound for the first time. Not a voice, not a roar. A deep, resonant exhale, like the universe sighing in relief. There was no sensation of passing through, no tunnel of light, no burst of color, just an abrupt absence of pressure. I stumbled forward onto solid deck plating and caught myself against a console. The engineering bay around me was quiet, too quiet. No alarms, no flickering lights, no blue glow from the coils. They stood dormant, dark arcs of metal reaching toward a ceiling that felt slightly lower than I remembered. I turned slowly. The opening was gone. No filament, no seam, just empty air. My hand was still outstretched, alone. The delta pulse was silent. The silence should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like a limb had been amputated. I inhaled carefully. The air smelled faintly of ozone and coolant, familiar, ordinary. "Engineering," I called, my voice echoing more than it should have. "Report." No answer. I walked toward the main console. The display screens were active, scrolling steady telemetry. One signal stream, not two. No mirror, no duplication. I checked the coil diagnostics. Status: inactive. Last major output: wormhole transit. Aborted. Aborted. My breath hitched. I pulled up the mission timeline. Transit initiated. 4 minutes in. Field instability detected. Commander Ishida issued abort command. Emergency return executed. Transit duration: 4 minutes, 11 seconds. We had never completed the 7. The planet HD 4419 never appeared in the logs. There was no orbital insertion, no storm world, no ocean world, just a return to our origin coordinates. I swallowed hard. "Bridge," I said, my voice thin. The intercom crackled to life. "Go ahead, Ward," Ishida replied. One voice, calm, singular. I closed my eyes briefly. "What's our current position?" There was a slight pause. "Earth-Moon L2. Same as before transit. You all right?" Before transit. My fingers dug into the console edge. "Status of crew?" I asked. "All accounted for," she said. "Minor turbulence injuries only." All accounted for. No mention of duplicates. No mention of collapse. "Copy," I managed. I ended the channel. The engineering bay felt wrong in a new way now. Not fractured, but subtly rearranged. Tools were placed differently. The scuff marks on the floor followed patterns I didn't recognize. I checked my sleeve. Ward. No number. My pulse quickened. I brought up the crew manifest. Ward, Caleb, Exophysics, Ishida, Mako, Command, Patel, Ravi, Navigation, Harrow, Lenora, Engineering, Lenora, only Lenora. I searched for Harlan. No results found. My throat tightened. I accessed pre-launch records, conference photo, parallax initiative, secondary trial phase. I was there, beside Ishida, beside Patel, beside Lenora. The banner read, First Manned Trial. First. No mention of a second. No record of an empty return. No documentation of identity dissonance research authored by me. It was all cleaner, simpler. I leaned heavily against the console. Memory flooded back in waves, not violently, gradually. The beach at Luna Harbor. Lenora laughing as wind whipped her hair. The bet with Patel about covering drinks if the transit succeeded. Ishida left-handed, always left-handed. These memories didn't feel foreign. They felt rooted, as if they had always been mine. And yet, beneath them, faint as an afterimage burned into vision, lingered something else. A storm world splitting at the equator, a corridor filled with duplicates, a figure tapping on the fabric of reality. I squeezed my eyes shut. The images didn't fade. They layered, like transparent sheets stacked imperfectly. Ward. The voice behind me made me flinch. I turned. Lenora stood near the coil array, wiping her hands on a cloth. Her hair was cut short. No braid. A faint scar traced down her cheek. Exactly as I remembered from the very beginning. "You zoning out again?" she asked, smirking slightly. "Again?" I repeated. "After the turbulence," she said. "You've been quiet." Her eyes searched my face with a familiarity that made my chest tighten. "You remember everything?" I asked carefully. "About what?" "The transit." Her smirk faded into something more serious. "Field instability at 4 minutes. Ishida pulled us back. We got lucky." 4 minutes, not 7. "And nothing else?" I pressed. She frowned. "Caleb, you hit your head pretty hard when the deck pitched. Keita cleared you, but if you're having gaps..." "I'm not," I said quickly, but I wasn't sure that was true. She studied me another second, then shrugged lightly. "Well, we're grounded for a while. Earthside Review Board is going to tear the data apart." Earthside. The word landed differently now, not as an unreachable home, but as somewhere we had always remained connected to. The coils behind her were dark, inert, no blue glow, no filament, no stable branch visible through a slit in space. The delta pulse was gone, completely, and in its absence, I felt an emptiness that was almost grief. Lenora stepped closer. "You sure you're okay?" I met her eyes, warm, solid, singular. "Yes," I said, and I meant it. "Mostly." She nodded and returned to her console. I stood alone beside the dormant coils. If the overlap had collapsed, if I had merged with continuity, then this was the dominant branch, the stable one, the one where we aborted, the one where the planet remained unseen, where the 7 minutes never completed, but memory is not so easily erased. As I stared at the coil array, I felt it, a faint vibration under my palm, so subtle I could have dismissed it. Not a pulse, not a rhythm, just a suggestion, like something breathing very far away. I leaned closer. There, a single, distant echo. Thumb. It was so faint it might have been imagination, or it might have been the beginning of another call. I withdrew my hand slowly. On the console screen, the last line of corrupted telemetry from transit flickered briefly before stabilizing. Delta pulse detected. Source. Internal structure. Then it vanished, replaced with no anomaly found. I stared at the text long after it settled. The universe had chosen its branch. Continuity restored. stable, clean. But somewhere in the back of my mind, a quiet certainty remained. We hadn't come back to the wrong universe. We had become the right one. And something, somewhere between the layers of those 7 unfinished minutes, was still listening. We docked at Luna Harbor 2 days later. The official explanation was simple. First manned wormhole attempt, field instability at 4 minutes, abort executed, crew safe, data invaluable. The parallax hung in its cradle like a chastened animal, its hull reflecting floodlights and the pale arc of Earth in the distance. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt watched, not by cameras, not by the review board, not by the quiet glances of crew members who'd lived through something they couldn't fully name, watched by the absence of the delta pulse, like silence itself had become an observer. They put us through debriefs and scans and interviews that stretched into hours. I answered every question with technical precision. I watched Ishida do the same, steady as stone. I watched Patel crack nervous jokes in the hallway, using humor like a pressure valve. Lenora smoked contraband sticks in a maintenance bay, pretending she didn't care what anyone thought. Keita asked me 3 times if I was experiencing unusual auditory phenomena. Each time, I said no. The truth was, I didn't trust my own yes. On the 3rd night, after the last formal briefing and the last locked file submission, I returned to Parallax alone. There were protocols against it, but protocols bend for the right signatures, the right clearance codes, the right moments when everyone is tired enough to stop caring. The docking tunnel was dim, lit by safety strips along the floor. The air smelled of metal cooling after exertion. Inside the ship, everything was still. No hum of engines, no circulating thrusters, just passive life support and the distant creak of structure settling. I walked the corridors slowly, letting my fingers trail along bulkheads as if touch could confirm reality. My quarters were exactly as they should be. The photo on my desk showed me and Lenora at Luna Harbor, laughing into the wind. The date on the frame matched my memory perfectly. My jacket, patch red, Ward, no number, no trace of stitching, no scars in the fabric. I sat on the edge of my bunk and listened. Nothing. No delta pulse, no whisper under the vents, only the soft thrum of the station outside the hull. I should have stopped there. I didn't. I went to engineering. The coil array chamber was dark, lit only by my flashlight beam cutting across the arcs of metal. Without power, the rings looked harmless, almost elegant. I stood at the core, where the filament had opened in the other alignment. I rested my palm against the central assembly. Cold metal. No vibration. Okay, I whispered, to no one. It's over. My voice sounded too loud in the empty bay. I turned to leave, and the ship spoke. Not over intercom, not through speakers, through structure. A single vibration traveled up my arm, so faint it could have been the settling of metal, the movement of distant machinery. Except it wasn't random. It had rhythm. Thumb. I froze. The sound didn't repeat. Silence returned. I stared at the coils until my eyes hurt, waiting for the next beat like waiting for a breath in a corpse. Nothing. I backed away slowly. As I did, my flashlight beam swept over the floor. And for a moment, I saw something that wasn't there. A thin seam in the air. Vertical, like a slit, cut into darkness. It lasted less than a blink. Then, it was gone. My pulse hammered. I shut off the flashlight and stood in complete darkness. I listened harder than I'd ever listened. At first, there was nothing. Then, faintly, so faintly I almost dismissed it as blood in my ears. Tap, 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 not on metal, not on the ship, on something deeper, on the idea of distance. I stepped back until I hit the console behind me. I raised my hand in the dark, palm open, facing the space where the seam had flashed. My skin tingled, the hairs on my arm lifted. "Who's there?" I whispered. No answer. Tap. A memory surfaced, uninvited. The figure in the corridor, edges indistinct, carrying multiple ship interiors like a cloak. Its fingers too long, bending wrong, touching an invisible boundary around me. My throat tightened. This branch was stable, it couldn't enter. That's what Ward 1 had said. But Ward 1 also said it could follow me if I hesitated too long. Follow, not enter. As if it didn't need to cross fully. As if it only needed to remain in contact. I swallowed. "We aborted," I said, voice shaking. "We didn't complete 7 minutes." The tapping stopped. Silence. Then, very softly, a voice breathed from somewhere not quite in the room, not spoken aloud, felt. 7 never ends. I clapped my hands over my ears. It didn't help. The words weren't sound. They were structure. They were the way my mind arranged meaning. I staggered forward blindly until my palm struck the coil assembly again. Cold metal. But beneath it, a warmth. Faint vibration. Not a pulse, a latency. Like something waiting with perfect patience. I stumbled back, heart racing. The darkness around me felt layered now, like I could peel it back if I tried. I turned and fled engineering, moving too fast through the corridor, nearly slipping at the ladder well. My breath came ragged. I didn't stop until I reached the bridge. The forward dome was dark. No stars, no planet. Just the black curve of the docking tunnel beyond. I stood at the command rail, gripping it until my knuckles ached. And then, in the glass of the forward dome, I saw my reflection. Normal. Singular. Except my reflection smiled a fraction of a second after I did. I didn't move. Neither did it. But the lag was there. A heartbeat of delay. A reminder. I leaned closer to the dome. The reflection leaned too, but not perfectly aligned. Its eyes held mine with an intensity that felt like recognition. Then the name patch on my reflected chest shifted. Ward. Ward 1. Ward 2. The numbers flickered like subtitles on unstable footage. I jerked back. The reflection returned to normal instantly. No number, just me. I stood shaking in the dark bridge until my breathing slowed. When I finally left the ship, I sealed every hatch behind me. I logged the visit. I did everything by the book, as if order could contain what had brushed against me. In my quarters on Lunar Harbor, I tried to sleep. When I closed my eyes, I saw the storm world and the ocean world overlaid. I heard the delta pulse faintly, not in my ears but in my ribs. Thump. Once. Then silence. I told myself it was trauma. I told myself it was a neurological echo from curvature exposure. I told myself it would fade. Weeks passed, then months. The parallax remained grounded. Committees argued, budgets shifted. The public heard only the sanitized version. Abort, safety, lessons learned. No one spoke of overlap. No one spoke of mirrored signals. No one spoke of a figure tapping on reality like it was glass. Sometimes, late at night, when the station power dipped and the lights in my room flickered, I'd feel it. A subtle misalignment. A lag between thought and feeling. Between breath and awareness. And once, only once, I woke to the sound of 2 heartbeats in my chest. Thump, thump, out of phase. I sat up, sweating, and stared at my hands in the dark. They looked normal, but my palms tingled as if they'd just let go of someone else's. I whispered into the room. "It's over." The station around me hummed softly. No answer came. But in the distance, through metal and vacuum and the thin fabric of what we call real, something tapped, once, like a finger testing a seam. Tap. And deep inside my bones, so faint it could have been imagination, the delta pulse answered. Thump. And that's where we'll leave Dr. Caleb Ward, in a universe that fits, in a life that feels continuous, but never entirely certain. If you enjoyed this journey into cosmic uncertainty, leave a like. It helps more than you think. And if you're not subscribed yet, consider joining us. We're getting closer to 10,000, and every signal you send keeps these stories alive. Until next time, listen carefully. If the silence ever develops a rhythm, don't answer it.